I'm Melissa Reader. Welcome to Conversations That Count. These are candid conversations with people about the highlights and the lowlights of caring for loved ones through the last stage of life. 83% of people who are currently caring for an elderly, frail loved one or someone with a terminal illness find it challenging to talk about, plan for, and manage this life stage and access the services they need. That's a really high number and it needs to be addressed. We need to find new and novel ways to help people with this life stage so that it can be the best it can be for everyone involved. But my focus here is on the stories, not the numbers. Hi, welcome to Conversations That Count. I'm Melissa Reader. I'm the CEO of Violet. I'm calling today from the Gundungurra lands of the Eora Nation, and I want to honour the traditional owners of the land and their enduring connection to it. So I'm talking today to Susie. Hi, Susie. Thanks for
Hey,
joining
Melissa.
us.
My pleasure.
Where are you calling from today?
I'm from the Gadigal lands.
And they're probably a little bit soggy as we are down here after the weather of the last couple of weeks, hey?
We absolutely are. It's been raining for about at least 10 days, but at least the sun's come out now, which is lovely.
Yeah, we can dry out a little bit. Susie, we wanted to have a little chat today about your dad. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your dad, his name, his age, and what's been happening?
Absolutely. Dad's actually very interesting. He's a Chinese background, so his actual birth name is Ket Wah Tay, Wah meaning sunshine. But when he came over here, he was only 18 and he adopted the name of Richard. So he goes by the name of Richard Tay or Richard Ket Wah Tay. So he came over from Sabah as an 18-year-old, hoping to study, and he did in fact study. He didn't end up finishing his study, but he of course met Mum, and they had my sister and myself, and we lived all around the place, but predominantly I guess they've landed in Newcastle, and that's where Dad is now. Dad's now 86. And he's in one of the Calvary nursing homes, and he was doing physically. He's been very, very well up until 2021 when after Mum passed, he got cellulitis in his legs and was hospitalised for 4 days, and it really triggered Alzheimer's, which we know that he was actually in that. He was experiencing that, but he certainly had been living independently. But after that, his decline has just been, sort of fairly rapid until now, where he's really actually now in end stage care, unfortunately. So that's the short version of it. Yeah.
Pretty amazing family history and heritage there that you've talked about.
Absolutely. I look at it particularly when I think about it in the context of the Australian, the development of Australia and the issues about having mixed race families, mixed race marriages. Dad was Mum and Dad were brave dudes,
Great family history and story.
Absolutely.
And I guess, keeping all that in mind and thinking about your dad at 86 in residential care, what are some of the things that are most important to him right now?
Look, I really need to speak about it in the last probably 3 years. One of the things that is always been in my mind about Dad, and also something that we talked about at length, was his loneliness. After Mum passed in 2017, Dad had always lived in a relationship with Mum and had always had her companionship. And one of the most important things to Dad, or one of the things that sort of, I guess, plagued him the most, was loneliness. And so where he was living, as we moved him, my sister and I and my brother-in-law moved Dad from various residential places from his original home where he and Mum were when Mum passed. We always wanted to make sure that he had people around him. He had a little dog until he could no longer look after the little dog. And one of the things I think that was most important was having people around, caring staff that that he could just be with. I mean, Dad actually would. I laugh a little bit to myself because Dad always go, I'm so lonely, and I was like, Dad, you're sitting with other people. He actually could sit with other people and be happy with that, but the sense of being isolated and not having somebody with him was, that's the quickest way to an early death. So I would say that was probably the most important thing, more so than food or all the surroundings or anything else. Yeah,
Mm. That kind of companionship.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And as you've gone through those last couple of years, Susie, with your dad and with your family, what have been some of the most difficult parts for you, I guess, for you and your family in navigating your dad's care, and maybe some of the
Oh,
most difficult parts for him?
so
Oh,
I think the most difficult thing is my sister has actually been up in Newcastle the whole time, and she's shouldered the responsibility on a day-to-day basis. And I mean, she's an amazing person, and she's got such a wealth of knowledge uh, and experience herself, being able, coming from the caring profession. So I've been extraordinarily lucky that way. And of course, I live further away, and the ability to be present and attend both for my father, but also for the wider family,
yeah.
has been the most challenging thing, I think. Uh, I think also just watching Dad in his decline. Excuse me a minute, I'll just get a tissue. I
Of
didn't
course, Susie. Yeah,
Thank
of
you.
course.
Yeah, I think, with family, I think any family that's had somebody with Alzheimer's, I read about it and it was saying, it's such a long goodbye, and it really is such a long goodbye. And, I will go up and see Dad, you know, as regularly as I possibly can. But even seeing that decline, I think the decline is more obvious to somebody who isn't there, on a daily basis. And that's a very difficult thing to come to terms with, and also manage your life in the meantime while you're still living very much. Somebody who's been so central in your life is dying. Plus, your family members around you who are also managing their own life and their own families and the own ups and downs that happen with everyday life. So it's probably
Yeah.
pretty ordinary what I'm talking about, but emotionally, it can be very, very challenging. And yeah, I have a greater appreciation. Mum died very suddenly, and that had its own issues with the shock of it. And Dad, however, has been, as I say, the long goodbye.
Gosh, you talk there about the ordinariness of it, but actually that's so important, isn't it? You know?
Totally, totally. And I have
Mm.
to say, and I know it may not, it segues though, is that one of the services that my sister told me about was your organisation was Violet. And she said to me, look, they offer this telephone service for counselling, and offered it to her boys. She's got two lovely boys, and offered it to me and said, would I be interested? And I said, look, absolutely. I mean, was the opportunity to just have somebody to have a conversation with them. And, it's such an ordinary space that I'm in, and such an extraordinary space that I'm in, that I felt that having somebody that I could talk to that knew the actual issues that might be happening for me right this very moment amongst a normal life. Yeah, that really, and as I say, it just segued into it, that the opportunity to just be able to say, oh my God, I'm feeling like this. And I know it's meant to be ordinary. I know that in the next 15 minutes I've got to go off and have a meeting, or I've got to go off and do this, or I've got to be my ordinary self. But behind me is what is, the burden, and it is a burden of waiting for Dad each time he progresses further down the track, being able to manage just the sadness.
Yeah. I think it's one of the very real and probably very silent parts of
Oh,
your of the sandwich generation, you know? It's, so many people out there are trying to
Absolutely.
manage exactly what you've just described.
And, we don't have a mentorship for it, in the grand scheme of how life is in our community. I feel, we do it, some families do it better than others, um,
Mm,
but we don't necessarily have that, we don't have the mentor, we don't have a structure around our life that is, all the families living together in the house. So when you're small, you see your grandparents die, or they live next door, or they live in the next suburb. I mean, we are so disparate now that uh,
mm.
we learn on the run how to manage, end of life. That's certainly my experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I think a lot of people would turn to their doctor, for that support or for some of that sense making, or may perhaps turn to their priest. But, all the statistics tell us that our relationship with religion is looking very different over time, and there's just a whole lot of people left in that space that you're describing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing that so honestly with us, Susie.
Uh,
Um, what about some of the more unexpected highlights? What have been the bits that might have surprised you in
well,
a happy way? Are there things that you could reflect on?
totally. I mean, one of the funniest things that my father at the moment, dad's, as I said, he's in end of care, and in fact today they've just called in the priest to see him in a couple of hours. And you never know at what point somebody is going to pass, but certainly along the journey, I mean, I have to say there was this is a terrible story actually, but the last time I was up spending an extended period of time with my father when my sister was actually away, dad actually suffered a stroke, and it happened right in front of me. Um, and the nursing staff were amazing. They were totally amazing. But when we finally got him back into, a space where just before the ambulances came, dad suddenly became extraordinarily lucid, and he has not been lucid for several years. And we had a really lovely conversation.
Right.
The other funny thing is that actually Tracy, my sister, Tracy's got this fabulous set of teeth. Anyway, every time Dad sees her, he says, "Gosh, you've got beautiful teeth." And then the conversation may go nowhere else other than that. But he's always so happy to see her, and he always comments on what beautiful teeth. And Tracy and I, of course, laugh quite. Uh, Texting him, "Dad, Tracy, how's Dad?" And he said, "My teeth are good. Your teeth are looking
All
good." And
good.
you've got to laugh at those moments. And also, as I said, those moments where Dad actually is lucid, and then he has this beautiful. Dad has this beautiful capacity for uh, for authenticity and honesty, and touching upon his own feelings, and it doesn't come out often, but when it does, it's a total. It's a privilege to experience it. So yeah, I've had those moments too.
Are they pretty precious memories and moments too as you're going through all this?
Totally. But one of the things,
Yeah.
as I said, you really, I said to myself, you must be present to this. As difficult as it is, you must be present. And I think that's the challenge, is being able to turn up, and keep turning up. Because it's actually, at the end of the day, it's actually not just for Dad, it's actually all for me. So that I do have these memories, I do have, these things to look back on and go, I lived that part of life with Dad as best I could, and these are the lovely memories that I have. Yeah.
Well, you might have just, in a way, answered the next question I was going to ask you, that I'll ask you anyway, in case there's other things. Do you have any advice? You think about the number of people that are going through this right across the country today, or maybe the people that aren't going through this right now, but they know it's ahead. Maybe they're back where you and your sister were 2 or 3 years ago. What would you say to those people? In terms of things they might want to think about or prepare for over the years that are ahead.
I really, it's also personal. I guess that's the thing I would say to everybody. It's so personal, and my heart goes out to you if you are yet to go through it. Um, it's a really let's be really kind to yourself, and also be kind to the people who are around, because everybody, despite what we might think, everybody's going through the same thing. And just think twice before if you can take a second before you react, that will help. But other than that, I have nothing really. It's, as I said, I'm just ordinary, and everybody's doing ordinary acts that hopefully get us through.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think your comments on just being present are really important too, and maybe they're actually pretty connected. Being
Yeah,
present and just taking that moment of pause,
yeah,
because there's so much going on, isn't there, in
ab
people's lives and
absolutely.
emotions when this is all happening, and
Yep.
and even for the health and aged care staff, there's so much
That's
going on for
right.
them.
That's
Mm.
absolutely right. And I think also it's okay that if you feel you can't turn up because it's just too much, I think that's perfectly fine too. And so I guess when I say being present, I'm saying being present to myself as well as being present to those
Yeah.
that are around. It is okay not to turn up.
To take that moment for you if that's what you need.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Susie.
That's
Really,
okay.
really, really love chatting with you. Thank you for taking a few minutes to talk about what's happening for you and your sister and your dad. We'll be
Uh,
thinking of you over the
Thank
next
you.
couple of days, couple of weeks. It sounds like your dad is at the very end of his life, so we're sending all of our love and strength your way.
Thank you. And thank you for opening up these conversations, which, if we had more of them, yeah, thank you.
That's the work, right?
Absolutely.
Mm. Thanks, Susie.
Bye bye.